My name is Sue Woolgar and I'm the Secretary of Hampshire Archives Trust. The Trust, together with Hampshire Field Club, organised a series of local history talks, including this one, entitled How to Make Films for Local History by Tom Young. Tom is a freelance videographer and filmmaker with a first-class honours degree in film studies and production from the University of Winchester, where he's currently working as a graduate research associate. Tom produced a showreel as part of his university studies, and that can be found on Vimeo. His talk is a masterclass on making films with minimal equipment that we may well already have, like smartphones, so it's well within the reach of most local history groups. A good example of what can be done is found by Googling Basingstoke Through the Ages, and that demonstrates the use of the Ken Burns effect, which Tom will explain in all its complexity later. One issue which comes up in the question and answer session at the end is the question of ownership of films and footage. And I think at this point it would be useful just to mention that if you are going to do such a local history film, it is well worth you producing a simple written agreement with both the people you're filming and the people who were filming it for you, or indeed your own involvement, to avoid any problems later. And in that vein, we suggest you seek advice from the net or elsewhere to be absolutely sure of the situation. Do also note that if you post your video on a platform such as Facebook or YouTube, the film that goes up is then governed by their terms and conditions rather than anything that you have compiled yourself. Finally, on the last of the slides that is shown tonight, you'll see there are a wealth of internet links that cover all aspects of filmmaking. You can recover these by either pausing the video or visiting the Hampshire Archives Trust website, where we will be producing a fact sheet and putting that up. We hope you enjoy the video and consider becoming a member of either the Hampshire Archives Trust or the Hampshire Field Club, or both. You can join up through either of their websites. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Young, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit how to make local history films. Just going to talk a little bit about why it's a good idea to make films and the importance of video, and a little bit about social media. So just to give you an idea that visual content, so that includes pictures as well, but mostly video, is 40 times more likely to get shared than all text content. So when thinking about what to make, maybe if you had a social media channel or you had a website, it's important to think that visually, video is the way things are going. And also there's a little figure there that says that online videos are going to account for 82% of all consumer internet traffic by next year. So most people are going to be going on the internet to watch videos. So it's definitely the way things are going. Films can deliver an exciting and dramatic effect for the audience, and they're far more powerful than any written communication. When shared online, they can reach thousands of people instantly within your local community and beyond. And just a little bit of advice is that YouTube tutorials, hopefully some of you are familiar with YouTube, but YouTube is a great resource for anything related to film or photography or editing or anything like that. YouTube has hundreds of thousands of videos of tutorials to help you get a start on anything you might be struggling with. Now, local history is an area where there is a lot of rich content to make films, and the films provides an interesting and entertaining way to present those stories and information to viewers of all ages, particularly young viewers that might be rather dull in print or written form. Now, making films also excites the whole community and entices excitement for an interest in the subject. Everyone loves to get involved when it comes to filmmaking. And from personal experience, people just, as soon as they see a camera, as soon as they see a crew, as soon as they see lights and all the kit, they love it. They'll be coming up to you and asking what you're doing, how they can be involved. And it's just a great way to get the community and anybody you want really involved together, collaboratively working on a project. And then once you filmed the film you wanted, you can then share it online and spread it around the community and beyond. And you can also do live screenings. That's quite popular, to do a live screening and then release it on the website or social media. And that can help increase an organization's profile on social media and within the local community itself. Now, I'm just going to highlight some tips on the process of producing a video. Now, first of all, it's easier than you think, and anyone can do it. And I'm a big believer in that, especially with the technology that's coming out now. A lot of it is very simple, is very user friendly, and it's a lot of the stuff now is made for beginners. They want people who haven't necessarily done it before to be involved, and it's easier than you think. The next thing to consider is when you're coming up with an idea, what is the purpose of your idea? So basically, if you're making a video, what's the purpose of that video? Is it to attract more members? Is it to attract viewers? Is it to attract website visits? To increase your following on social media? It's important to take these into consideration when making your videos. And once you've come up with an idea, it's important to think about if it's achievable. So are you able to get the interviewees that you want, the talent, the locations? Are you able to get the shots you want? Is it achievable? Obviously, we want you to be ambitious, but it's good to be realistic with those ambitions. Now, getting a team together. So it's important to get everybody involved. So that could be colleagues, friends, and freelancers. You might have a friend that's quite good at using a camera, and you might have another person that's very good at editing. And you might actually need to bring in someone like a freelancer to do sound for you. But most of this can be done by your colleagues and friends and yourselves. So getting as many people as involved as possible always lessens the load anyway. So, and it's good that some people might be good at certain things and some people at others. Now, the next thing is organising the schedule for the whole production. So it's important to align everyone's availability, because that can be quite difficult, especially if you're shooting for long days and long weeks. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about sourcing talent and casting. So if you need actors, maybe for a reenactment, maybe you're doing a period reenactment piece, so you need to get people dressed up, you need to get actors involved. It's quite simple. You can head on over to Facebook, and there's hundreds of acting groups where people they join the group, they sign up, and they sort of network with each other, and you can put a post on there saying that you want people involved in your project, and is anybody interested? And it's really easy. You can log in on Facebook on your account, and you can just join a group or request to join a group. And for example, I joined the Hampshire Filmmakers and Actors UK group, and they're really, really good. And it's an easy, quick way to sort of network with people and sort of get quick instant messaging with any crew or cast. Another website is mandy.com. It's a little bit more professional. You can post an advert on there saying that you're making a film and you're looking for actors, looking for crew. You can also obviously go on there and view other adverts as well. So you'll have people, actors, voiceovers, child actors, and so forth will be putting adverts on there for their services. So once you've got in contact with your talent and your actors and so forth, the best thing to do now, especially during the pandemic, is get on a Zoom call with them, talk with them, have a script read, have a project meeting with an interviewee maybe, sort of just have a talk with them and sort of find out if they're right for the project. Now, some actors and interviewees, they will require payment, but some won't require payment, but they will ask that you pay for their expenses, so their transport, their food, things like that. And when I was at university, a lot of the actors we didn't necessarily have to pay anything to have them come and help us, but we had to sort of cover their expenses, and they were more than happy with that. They want to be pampered, really. They want to be looked after, and that's great. And also you want to sort of include their name in the credits and a copy of the film. Most people would like a copy of the film so they can add it to their portfolio. And then finally, in terms of actors, it's important to remember that there's strict guidelines when working with children. There's a little post on the left there, which gives like some brief sort of guidelines when working with children. But if you had any other information, wanted to have any other information about it, you can just head over to the link I've provided, or there's some information on the government website, UK Gov website too. Okay, so treat your talent and interviewee like royalty. Now this is an understatement. They are, after all, the centre of a great production. Without them, we would just be filming empty rooms. Let them get involved in the project during script reads, rehearsals, and filming. You can talk to them about any ideas they might have, because a lot of the time, actors and interviewees might have some ideas that you might not have even thought of. It's important to talk to them about it and see what they have to say. It gives them the opportunity to be excited to be a part of the project, and they feel a part of it rather than just working for the project. They can feel like they've got a piece of themselves in it as well. Another important thing is to feed them well. Provide tea and coffee, because everyone's going to need it, especially if you're shooting for long days and long times at a time. And it's important to feed everyone because it keeps everybody happy. There's nothing worse than having hangry crew, and actors especially. And it's important to remember that your crew will want to work harder and for longer because they want to, not because they have to. And it's also important to take in dietary requirements and to do this usually beforehand when you're in the pre-production process. Now, we're going to have a little bit of a talk about equipment and software now. So we're going to start with smartphone filmmaking. Now, I know a lot of you might think, oh, you can't make a film on a smartphone. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. Obviously, there's certain downfalls to filming on a smartphone, which I'll mention, but they're getting better and better. And they're getting as good as top-end cameras now, especially the new iPhones and the new Samsungs. But with an iPhone, obviously you can film and edit directly from your phone. You don't need a computer or anything like that. You can do it all on your phone. You've got a camera, you've got a microphone, you've got video editing apps. Most phones have them preloaded on them now, so you don't even have to download them. You can utilize still images, video, and sound. You can export them and share them directly from your phone, directly to social media and email. You can also transfer your video to your laptop and PC using a cable from your phone if you want to use a higher end piece of software like iMovie or Premiere Pro. You can do this on both iPhones and Android devices. You can also acquire extra lenses for your phone, which is really neat. And there's some examples there at the bottom left of some of the lenses you can buy for your phone, and they just clip on the outside of your camera, and you can get, I think it's something like 8 or 10 lenses for like £10 to £20 on Amazon. So it's a really good deal. And usually if you wanted to buy 8 or 9 lenses for a high-end camera, you're looking at thousands of pounds. So for a smartphone, you can get between 8 and 20 lenses for something like £10 to £20, which is really, really good. Just something to mention, obviously, when you're using a smartphone, the microphone isn't very good on it. It doesn't catch a very good sound. We all know that. So it's important to take that into consideration and to maybe invest in an external mic or a lapel mic. So an external mic can be anything like a Rode mic or a boom mic, which is sort of like you can plug it into the headphone jack. Or the power on an iPhone, you have to use a lightning cable adapter, but they just plug into the iPhone or the Android phone. And the same goes for lapel mics, the mics that clip onto shirts, clothing, and it makes for capturing better sound. But you can still use your smartphone. You have to invest a little bit more for a decent mic. And the smaRTphone video basics, it's a lot easier than you think. A lot of the apps now, obviously, as I mentioned, become pre-downloaded, pre-installed anyway. They also can do a lot of it for you, and they sort of like walk you through the process anyway. And obviously you've got a camera and a microphone and all of that all included on the phone itself, so you don't have to invest in any other cameras or editing software or any computers or anything like that. And I've just provided some links there for anybody who wanted to check out the basics of making films on smartphones. Okay, so now we're looking at the higher end kit and higher end software. So for the more professional kit, we've got some examples here of the Canon EOS 90D, then that's the camera I've got. And also some examples of some camcorders there at the bottom. But the more professional kit utilizes DSLR cameras, which is like the Canon 90D, as you can see. Mirrorless cameras, which tend to not have a viewfinder and a mirror, so everything's sort of viewed digitally through the screen. And then you've got camcorders at just the 2 examples at the bottom there. And these are used to create higher quality videos, which can then be edited on laptop and desktop computers using professional software such as Adobe Premiere Pro or iMovie. Now, it's important to remember that with DSLR cameras, mirrorless cameras, and cinema cameras, they have interchangeable lens capability. So what that means is you can change the lenses on them. You could have a 50mm and then think, oh, I really fancy a wide or a zoom shot here. You can change the lenses accordingly. But with camcorders, you can't do that, unfortunately. They're locked with, obviously, as you can see, they're locked with the lens they come with. But you can move closer if you want, move further away, go lower, higher. You can zoom in on camcorders. You just have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to actually the camera's position, rather than just being able to change the lens. Now, with these cameras, unlike the smartphones that record straight on the smartphone, these cameras use a thing called SD cards. Now, there's an example at the top right there of the screen. Now, SD cards are purchased separately. They don't come with the cameras themselves, but they're quite cheap. And you need an SD card reader to be able to take the files off the SD card and put them on your computer. But that's as simple as taking the SD card out of the camera, sticking it into the SD card reader itself, and then the file just comes up on the desktop on your computer. And the pair can cost anywhere between £30 to £50 on Amazon. Now, these cameras can do a lot more than smartphones in terms of, obviously, as I mentioned, lens choices, better sound, image quality, more control over the image. You can let more light in, less light in. You can change all the settings and so forth. And it allows for more creative and dramatic images. But smartphones are catching up. And I know a lot of films and TV are made on smartphones now. I watched a clip yesterday of a clip from Good Morning Britain. A whole news segment of that was filmed on an iPhone. And you couldn't tell the difference. So obviously you're looking at the higher end smartphones of that, but that even the normal cheaper priced iPhones and Android devices are getting as good. In terms of the editing software for high quality video, I use something called the Adobe Creative Cloud, and some of you might have already heard of Adobe. But they do a software package called Creative Cloud, which gives you sort of different pieces of software and apps to edit sound and special effects and things on. But the main one I would recommend is Premiere Pro, which is a really good video editing software and sound editing software for professional video. And it's something I used all the way through university and I still use now. And I really recommend Premiere Pro. And you can even get Premiere Pro on your smartphone as well as your desktop computer. So it's important to take that into consideration. And also with MacBooks and Macs, iMovie is really good, and that already comes pre-installed for free on the Mac devices. So that might be something you might want to check out as well. Now again, the professional kit and the Adobe Premiere Pro and iMovie basics, similar to the smartphone. I've put a website here, obviously, for Adobe that you can go and take a look and see if just have a little look at the software, see what they offer. It's just a roundup, really. Premiere Pro is an industry standard software, so you can do lots of things with Premiere Pro that you can't necessarily do on the smartphone. But like I say, you can get Premiere Pro on the smartphone now, so a lot of that is interchangeable. The files are transferred from SD cards through SD card readers, and this is also the same with iMovie. Premiere Pro and iMovie are very similar, but Premiere Pro is a more advanced version of it. And again, I've just provided some links there and some YouTube tutorials for anybody that didn't have any knowledge of it and wanted to get started. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about other equipment that you can buy for smartphone and camera filmmaking. So obviously you've got the tripod. I imagine a lot of people have heard of that. So you can buy that for your camera. You can even buy a smartphone tripod. It's that one just to the right there, that tiny little one. They're very useful. They're actually very good as well. Other camera grip you can buy. Everyone's heard of the selfie stick. This can be, obviously, you can film yourself if you were doing maybe a social media post at an event. That might be quite useful. But you can also obviously turn the camera around and use the selfie stick as almost a mobile tripod, which might be quite useful if you wanted to keep a shot very still when your hand's a little bit shaky. Another thing is the video cage, which is just to the right, just at the bottom left there, the tiny little picture. The video cage is good for DSLRs, so it keeps your shots stable. You can do nice smooth movements with it. A sound recorder for recording sound separately. Now you can record straight to camera or straight to your iPhone or Android, that's fine. But if you wanted to record to a separate recorder, that's sometimes beneficial, and it allows you to capture more precise sound. But they can range from anywhere between £100, because it's got one outlet, to £300, and they have like 4 outlets with 4 pieces of audio that can be recorded at once. But you're probably only looking at one sort of wavelength, one piece of sound recording at a time. So you're looking at about £100 for that. And then there's something called a dead cat, which is essentially a cover for a mic. You would have seen them. They're on the mics to stop the wind interfering with the sound. They're usually about £20. An external mic. Now this is important, I think. You want to try and invest in something that gets you the best sound. And you might not want a sound recorder, but I would recommend investing if you're going to invest in a camera or you're going to use your smartphone, do invest in a decent microphone. Now, an example is the bottom right there of the slide is a Rode mic. They're a very good make of microphone, and they're available on Amazon from about £50 to £100, and you can go up to more than £100, but the £50 to £100 ones are really, really, really good. And you can, like I say, you can use them with smartphones or high-end cameras. They all just plug into the either the outlet port on the camera or the headphone jack or power outlet on an iPhone or an Android. Now, another microphone to maybe invest in is a lapel mic. Now, they're the mics that obviously clip on the clothes. They're ideal for interviews and documentaries. They can also help with if you're having trouble with wind on location. If you have a lapel mic, you know, under someone's jacket, and you're capturing their voice quite clearly, it might save you a lot of time in trying to sort out protecting the boom mic with a dead cat and getting it into the right position. Investing in a decent pair of headphones is always very good, so that you can listen to the sound very clearly. A hard drive. Now, a hard drive you want really, because if you're editing lots of videos and you're editing high amounts of video, they can take up quite a lot of space, sound included. So you might want to invest in a hard drive to store it all on. And it can also mean you can take it from laptop to a computer, or you can take it around a colleague's house, or you can take it somewhere else instead of it just being locked onto one computer. And it is also good to always have a hard drive and work off a really good hard drive, just so you're not clogging your computer with all these unnecessary files. And they can be anything from £50 to £100. Now, a clapperboard, £20. That's used to sync sound in the post-production. You've seen it on films, you know, like they say, an action, and they clap the clapperboard down. Basically, that clap helps the editor sync sound with video in the post-production process. I've provided some links at the end of the presentation to help with that. But it also helps the editor. You can write, you know, scene 1, take 1. And it also helps the editor, especially if you've had to do a lot of takes, it helps the editor organize things in post-production. Okay, so video format and file types. So when working with video, you will use different, they're called codecs and containers, but for our case, they're file and format types. And they depend on what camera you're using. Some cameras use MOV, some use MP4, some use different file types. Usually, whatever camera you're using, it will tell you what files it's using anyway. But they're dependent on what model you have. But the two main types you'll come across is MP4. It's one of the most common types used on the internet for downloading, uploading, streaming videos, and .mov, which is an Apple-based file type, but can also work on Windows and Linux computers. But it's just, MOV is usually the file type you get when you're just using Apple products. And there's a link there in case you wanted to have a look at any other codecs, or you came across any other file types you didn't recognize. There's a little link there for some more information on that. Okay, so now we're going to have to actually look at the fun stuff. We'll have to look at the production process itself. So the production process is made up of 3 sort of areas. So you've got the pre-production, which is anything that takes place before filming. You've got production, which is the production, the producing, the filming of the film itself. And then you've got post-production, which is anything that happens after filming is complete. So that's the editing, you know, sharing on social media, the screening, all those sorts of things. It's important when making a video or a film, planning is essential. Now, planning is essential for anything, but for film, it's very, very important, because you don't want to be wasting any time on the day that you've spent, you know, weeks organizing, you know, getting everybody together and getting everybody available. You don't want to spend time on the day worrying about things that you should have worried about possibly in the pre-production process. And that can be things like location scouting is important, because you want to go to a location before you head to the location with all the crew and all the kit. You want to go there beforehand, maybe with a little tripod and a camera like the man at the bottom of the slide, and just sort of have a look, see if it's the right location for you. Do you need any permission to film there? It's important not to be too ambitious with locations. Say, for example, you wanted to film at, you know, I don't know, Winchester Cathedral, for example. That might not be that might be a bit too ambitious, because you have to take into account, would it be available? How much is it going to cost? And all these sorts of things. So it's good to take that into consideration. Thirdly, you want a storyboard. So I've given some examples of a storyboard at the top right there. You don't have to be an artist. They can be anything simple. You just want to get your ideas down on paper, or you can even do storyboards online now. You just want to get them down so people can look at them, you know, they can see with their own eyes what you're talking about. And that can be you can add details in there of what the shot type will be, camera movement, what crew what kit you're going to need on the day, and so forth. But storyboarding is good for just sort of pre-planning, and you can sort of work out with the director and other crew members if that shot will necessarily work and what you need for it. So it's important as well, when you're sourcing video and editing equipment, are you going to use a smartphone or a camera? Are you editing on a smartphone, or are you editing on a desktop? Are you recording on a separate recorder? Are you recording sound on a separate recorder? Or are you using an onboard camera? These are things to take into consideration before you even begin making a film. But this is sort of like the things you would do in the pre-production process. And that also involves, you know, looking for talent, organising the shoot, getting everybody's availability down, making sure the talent can get to the set, can get to the location. You have to take train times into consideration. You know, we filmed early last year, just before the pandemic. We had really bad rain and wind, and we were filming outside. Now, that was a really big problem. So we had to keep an eye on the weather, just like I'm talking like a week before shoot and then days before the shoot, because obviously British weather can be very interchangeable. But we had to move our shoot from outside inside because the weather was just too bad. So it's important to take those weather into consideration as well, especially in England. And then there's the filming, and then there's the editing. Okay, now you've got the roles and tasks within a production itself. So the first one I just want to mention briefly is the producer. Now, the producer organises the whole production, or you usually have a number of producers. But for smaller projects, and probably for you guys, you'll probably share the producer role between a number of you. Just because it makes it not. You'd rather have someone focusing on being the editor or the sound, or the cameraman or the director or something like that, and sort of the producing can be shared out, and someone can be helping sort out casting, somebody could be sorting out locations, somebody could be organising the food, somebody could be organising this, that, or the other. So it's important, I think, within the producer role that everyone mucks in, everyone gets together, everyone helps out. But this also might this might also be considered in other roles. So you might be the sound guy, but you might also be helping with the editing. You might be the camera guy that's sort of helping the guys with directing, and so forth. But the reason being is that obviously on these smaller projects, your crew is constrained, and also so is your budget, if you even have a budget, that is. Okay, so lighting. Now, don't get too scared about this. It's simpler than it looks. The lighting basics are, I've sort of started with the standard 3-point lighting setup. Now, it's important not to underlight your scenes because they can ruin it. So if you go to the you've spent all day filming, you go to the editing suite and all your footage is too dark, or you didn't light that properly. You can fix it in post, as they say, but it's not a very good motto to live by. Let's fix it in post. We'll just fix that in post. That's not a very good motto to live by, but you can fix some things in post, but it's good to try and get the lighting right on the day. Now, with the standard 3-point lighting, one of the reasons I've brought it up is because it's used in interviews and documentaries quite a lot. So I thought I'd mention that briefly, but there's a lot of other creative things you can do when it comes to lighting. And the standard 3-point lighting is usually, 2 in front, 1 behind. You have the key light, which is the main source of light on the subject. And it develops sort of like the overall look and feel of the whole shot. And it's usually 45 degrees in front of the subject. Secondly, the fill light sort of acts in conjunction with the key light. It's always opposite the key light and dims slightly. And it's usually, and the reason it's called the fill light is because it's used to fill in the shadows created by the key light. So you can imagine a big bright light on the subject's face or anything that you're filming. That's going to create shadows in certain areas. So you use the fill light to fill out those shadows. Or if you do want some shadows, maybe for creative effect or to create a mood, you can just dim it slightly instead of eliminating shadows entirely. And then a backlight, sort of self-explanatory, goes behind the subject and is used to separate the subject or whatever you're filming from the background. Now, the reason being this is important is because if you just use the key light and the fill light, you get a very flat image because your subject would be blending into the background as such. So the backlight helps separate the subject from the background. So you would usually shine this on, the back of their head, shoulders, backside of their shoulders and their head, to help them separate themselves from the background. And I've also provided a link there to some LED lighting kits. So LED is the new way to go now with lighting. They're a lot cheaper. They don't get hot. They can run for long periods of time, and they've got great battery life. So LED lighting kits they're tiny little LED lights. I'm talking like the size of an envelope that you would purchase. I think you can get packs of 3 or something on Amazon for £100 to create your standard 3-point lighting, which is really cheap, and they're very, very bright. and they're very, very versatile. So if you are looking at buying some lights, LED lighting kits on Amazon with the link I provided are the best way to go. Now, just a little bit more into lighting, you want to lean into the light already available to you. So in other words, utilize the light you already have. So if you're filming outside, you want to use the natural outdoor light. You want to use the sun. You want to, I mean, in England, we're quite lucky to have sun, but you want to use the natural light available to you as much as you can. Or if you're in a room, you might want to use room lighting, lamps, or the natural light coming in through the window. It's important to utilize the light you already have and then use the lights you have to work around the lighting of already available to you. So you could use the LED lights to your advantage in conjunction with the natural light through the windows indoors, or you might use a reflector outside to help bounce the sunlight onto your subject. Because lights, as I've mentioned before, can be quite expensive, but LED lights and the light wand as well, another example here of a very, very, very integral piece of lighting kit. Very versatile. You can like get 8 different colors. You can change the brightness, you know, white, blue, red, green, and you can change the, you know, the intensity of that brightness. And you would usually only need 1 or 2 of them, and then you would have like a really pretty decent lighting setup. And like I say, you can use different colors to create different styles of mood. Now, the reflector is another integral piece of kit that I recommend people purchasing. Now, it acts essentially as a light. It uses the material on the reflector itself to reflect the light onto the subject. So what you could do, for example, is you could shine a light on the reflector and then reflect that light onto the person. And also another common thing to do is to use a white wall or the roof inside a room as the ceiling, rather, to reflect the light onto the subject instead of shining the light on the subject. This can shining a light directly on the subject can be quite harsh. So you might want to bounce that light off a wall, or you might want to bounce it off a reflector. And here, for example, the sun is acting as the key light outside, and then the reflector is acting as the fill light. So you're reflecting that key light onto the subject to fill in those shadows, or just to give her a better definition in the face. And they can be purchased on Amazon for about £20. Okay, so for more on lighting, because obviously there's a lot more on lighting. You know, I imagine you've all seen the old classic Hollywood films of neo-noir and, you know, the 80s movies, you know, the big bright colors and neon lights and things like that. So there's different styles you can go when it comes to filming. And you can even implement that in documentary. I've seen many documentary films now that go for that cinematic lighting to give it a sense of emotion and to really sort of attract the viewer in. But there's some links here that you can follow, and it's just a reminder that YouTube tutorials, again, are our greatest asset. There's so many videos online that people have made that can just help you with from the simple things to the really complicated things. Okay, so actually getting to the filming in the camera now, which is the fun bit in my opinion. But the main lenses to consider, that's for smartphone and for camera, because as I mentioned, you can get the lenses for your smartphones, is the 50mm, or what they call the nifty 50. And the reason they call it the nifty 50 is because every filmmaker utilizes it. It's a very versatile lens. You can use it for different shot setups. It's very good for capturing 2 actors, which is very important usually in films when you've got 2 actors talking in a scene or walking down the street or anything like that. The nifty 50 is very nifty, and it's very, very, very versatile, and it's probably the main lens you would probably want to have. And the second lens you would like to invest in is the 24 to 105mm lens, or what they would call a zoom lens. Now the zoom, this zoom lens almost has several lenses in one. So you've got the focal length is 24 to 105. So you've got all that range of zooming in, zooming out, all those different shot types that you can get out of that one lens. It's a good lens to have because it is essentially like 5 lenses in one. It's just a good lens to have because you can get so much out of it. And then finally, the 14 to 35mm lens, or what they call the wide angle. The wide angle lens is good for landscapes, for setting a scene, for opening shots. You might want to, you know, again, I'm using Winchester Cathedral as an example, but you might want to get a shot of Winchester Cathedral on a sunny day. Now, you might want to use a wide angle for that because you're going to get the whole cathedral in the shot of a wide angle. Maybe you'll get some of the background, some of the foreground in it as well. And you can also get some really interesting creative effects out of a wide angle. You know, if you wanted to get a close up with a wide angle, you get almost quite a spooky-esque, you know, strange look to the person if you stuck a wide angle in a close-up, compared to if you were to use a 50mm. Now, this is just a slide for everybody to look at, really. I won't talk much about it, but it sort of just gives you an idea of the focal length, what type of lens it's called, and then what those types of lenses are used for. I mean, obviously, you don't have to follow the book, you know, the rule book, and there is no rule book really. These are just what they're, you know, the lenses are good at. But you can use them. You could use, like I said, a wide angle for a close-up, and you'd get some really interesting results out of that. But that's just like a little slide for everybody to have a look at afterwards, in case they wanted to know what lenses are used for what. Okay, so when filming, it's important to shot list. Now, shot listing is it's essentially a detailed note on everything related to the shot and the camera. So it's like the storyboard, but it's basically just a little list. So you might have shot type, close up, description, and then you write in there what that might mean. And then you've got camera movement. You write in there what that meant. You know, where's the camera going to be? Is it going to move? Do you need assistance with that? What lens are you using? So it's just a detailed list of everything to do with the camera and everything to do with the actual shot itself. And the reason you want a good shot list is because you want to be dealing with all these problems beforehand. You don't want to be wasting time on set on the day, scrabbling around, going, oh, what lens should we use? What lens should we use? What shot should we use? You want to sort of prepare for this before you're filming, because you don't want to waste any time on the day, like I say, because you've already spent a lot of time organising that, getting people together, getting the kit ready, the locations and so forth. Now, focus. Now, make sure what you're capturing is in focus. Now, the reason I say this is because there's very little you can do to out of focus footage once it's been filmed out of focus. It's almost because once the camera's captured it out of focus, there's nothing for you to save, because the camera's captured it out of focus. So it's important just to remember that your footage is in focus. Get coverage. Don't shoot from one angle. Mix it up. You know, moving closer, take the camera higher, move it in lower, change the lenses. Really experiment. Really use the breadth and depth of what you've got available to you. You know, that might be a smartphone or a camera, but move the camera around. You know, get it closer, get it wider, get it further away, change the lens, you know, experiment. And another one thing I just wanted to mention as well is something called B-roll. Now, B-roll, you might have heard of it before, but B-roll is footage that is used for cutaways, usually in documentaries, to add emotional tension to a scene. So, for example, if you're watching a documentary on, I don't know, London, you might get some shots of the city, but then the B-roll footage might include, you know, the main footage might be the interviews with the mayor of London, and with some really important figures, and then the B-roll footage might be shots of buses going by, you know, close-ups of people's feet walking along the pavement, you know, the pigeons of Trafalgar Square and the river of the River Thames, and, you know, all the little details that help bridge all the footage, the important footage, you know, the stuff like the interviews and things like that, really bridge it all together and create a really interesting and dynamic film, rather than just a film that's got interviews, you know, in the main shots. You want to create interesting footage, and that's called B-roll. Okay, just to mention briefly the 5 basic camera movements, if you weren't sure. You've got the static shot, most basic, just devoid of movement. The pan, where you pan from one side of the shot to the other. The tilt, you know, up and down. The zoom, which is again with the zoom lens. You would zoom in on the subject using the zoom lens. You know, you're manipulating the lens itself so that it zooms in on the person or on the subject. And then you've got the dolly shot. Now, the reason I included wheelchair, if some of you were asking, is that the dolly shot is a shot where the whole camera itself moves in or closer, or the camera moves away from the subject. So instead of it being the zoom where you physically manipulate the lens, the dolly shot is the whole camera itself is moving forward or backwards. Now, a really easy way to achieve this is to stick your camera operator in a wheelchair, if you've got one, get somebody to stand behind him or her and just wheel them around. Well, I say wheel them around, wheel them forward or backwards. But that gives you a dolly shot, because usually dolly shots use quite expensive pieces of equipment. But with a wheelchair, you've got the dolly shot effect of moving closer or moving further away, and then the smooth moving forward and moving further away with it, which is what you get with the dolly shot. And you don't want any shaky camera anyway, unless you're intending for that to be like that. Okay, so directing talent. Now, directing talent is talking to the actors, talking to the interviewees. You know, like I said earlier, treating them like royalty. You want to make them feel comfortable. The director essentially probably has more, other than anybody who's involved in casting, but usually the director is very, very involved in things like that. So the director might have what could be termed the closest relationship with the talent and interviewee, just because they've worked with them the most, they've had the most script reads, they've had the most Zoom meetings, and they themselves, the director and the talent, they're the people that sort of bring that acting or that interviewee, the project to fruition. Now, when giving an interview or a talent time to, you have to, or watching an actor work, you have to give them space to work. Don't shout cut too early. If they've made a mistake, don't shout cut straight away, because there's nothing more frustrating for them and for the crew if you're just shouting cut all the time. You know, cut, this is wrong. If they've done it wrong, if they're going on a tangent while they're talking, just let it flow naturally, because you might get something out of it that you weren't going to get, you weren't expecting. And you might have a bit of footage there that you can use. It might be really useful. You might be able to use it as a cutaway or for B-roll. So it's important to let them talk, let the natural flow of the scene or the interview happen. And then if they still haven't done what you needed by the end of it, you can just ask them to do it again. And that, basically, like I've said, I've put there, let them get in the zone. It's important to let them get in the zone. Don't keep taking them out of it by saying cut all the time. It's important to let them get involved. Now, blocking. So blocking is the early stages of rehearsing a scene. The director will work through the cast to place everybody in the set where they need to be. They'll walk through the actions. If it's with an interviewee, they might just sit down and talk to them about what to expect, test out the lighting, make them look pretty, all that sort of things. You don't want people looking, unless you're intending it, you don't want, like, big shadows under the eyes, things like that. You want to sort of work that out in the blocking and the setting up of the scene beforehand. Now, the on-set procedures, when it comes to making a film or being a director, they can be something like quiet on set. They'll always ask sound, are they rolling? They usually answer with speed. If they're asking the camera, they say rolling. Once the sound and the camera are ready, the director shouts action and the magic begins. Now, this looks complicated again, but don't get too scared. The only reason I've put these things down is because capturing sound is as important as capturing video. Capturing good sound is as important as capturing good video. You have to take sound into consideration, because when you're watching a film, if you notice something about the sound is off, it immediately takes you out of it. So it's important to put as much effort into the sound as it is the video. Now, as I mentioned before, external microphones, lapel mics, they can work with smartphones, they work with cameras, they can plug straight into the headphone and mic ports, and these will give you detailed, crisp sound that the onboard camera mics and your smartphone mics might struggle with. And it's important when capturing sound, use wind stoppers. Keep that wind out of your sound. You don't want to peak your sound. You don't want to blow out your sound. You don't want to ruin your sound by large amounts of wind pushing the levels all the way up to zero, because it's all done in minuses here. And it's important to point the mic towards the subject. Don't have the mic hanging down. You want somebody who's reliable to be pointing your mic and to be in control of sound, because if they're just, they're just holding the mic in front of them and it's a little bit pointing towards the floor, the sound is going to capture what it's pointing towards the floor. So it's important to point the mic towards the subject. Now, external mics can be used handheld or on a boom for better sound placement, or they can be plugged into a separate recorder or directly into your smartphone, as I've already mentioned. Lapel mics, ideal for interviews and documentary, or when you need to hide the microphone on an actor. And they're very good. They're good for interviews, like I said, and they're good for outdoors for when wind is a problem. And you want to try and alleviate that as much as possible by hiding it in the clothes and so forth. Now, again, like I mentioned, you want to avoid clipping your sound, or what's called clipping your sound. And that's when you wipe off the top of the sound wave by blowing out the sound with, I don't know, might be someone speaking too loudly into a mic. When you see those high levels of sound and they clip at the top, that's what clipping your sound is. It's too loud. It ends up distorting your sound and it sounds absolutely awful. So you want to try and keep your sound levels between -10 and -20 decibels, with -12 being ideal. Now, if you're using a DSLR camera or a recorder, you'll see this on the top right there. There's an example. You'll see these levels and these displays on those devices. On smartphones, you won't see those sorts of levels, but you'll be able to hear when your sound is close to peaking, just because it will sound very uncomfortable. It won't sound very good. Another thing to mention is room tone. The room tone is the sound of a location and is vital in the editing process. So room tone is basically a couple of minutes of the location in dead silence. So you want everybody on set to be quiet for a couple of minutes, 3 minutes, maybe a bit longer. whilst the sound recordist records the room tone or the location tone. And basically that records the sound of the location or the room. So when it comes to editing, you have that available to you to fill in any gaps in sound, so there isn't any unnatural, silent bits. Okay, then secondly, the second to last is the licensing of music. Now, if you're using music, it's important to use to search when on Google, search for the right term. Now, if you want music in your film, it's important to know that licensing, obviously copyright, comes with that. So when Google searching for it, just type royal-free music in, or music to use commercially for free, and it will come up with lots of different websites for you to use. And usually all you have to do is credit the person who's made the piece of music in the credits. Or on what we did with Hampshire Archive Trust's remote interview series was just put it in the social media post, just put it at the bottom, just say music provided by yada yada yada. Yeah, but it's just important to remember that. And then finally, sound effects. If you want to add any sound effects like cityscape, cars, explosions, maybe a dog barking, children laughing, anything like that, any random sound you want or need, freesound.org is an amazing website where you can find all of those sounds for free. And again, all you have to do is just credit them in the credits. You don't have to pay for them. Okay, we're heading into the last couple of slides now. So we're heading into the editing process itself. So once you've filmed you've got all your footage, you've got all your sound, you've taken it into the software on your computer or on your smartphone. Now you're starting to look at editing the footage. Now you'll on a smartphone or on a desktop, you'll have something what's called a timeline. Now a timeline is the picture on the right there, and that is just a collection. It looks quite complicated, but you can see the bottom files are the sound files. The green files, the green plain files above that are images. Again with the blue, they're images as well. They're just certain types of images. And the pink squares are usually things like titles and things like that. So they look complicated on a timeline, but they're not. They're just trying to give you a simplistic way to edit, which is usually just editing in blocks. You can imagine like playing Connect 4 or something. You're fitting them into a pattern that will look, sound, and deliver on what you're trying to achieve. Now, using music can elevate the emotion and set the tone of your film. Now it's important to remember that when making your film, is that music can change the tone or set the tone of your film. So I think music's you should utilize music as often as you can, because it can really make or break a film using music. Another thing, color grading and color correction. Now, when you're in the editing process and you've got all your footage in there, you can use some features in the software to color grade and color correct your footage. So for example, with color grading, it will help you make your footage look cleaner, more cinematic. You might add some contrast, you might add a bit of shadows in there, you might make the image a bit brighter or darker. You might add a bit of color to the image, you might put a green tint over all your footage, I don't know, for whatever reason you'd like. You can do that. Color grading allows you to do that. You can also correct any problems with color correction. So for example, if you've recorded footage and it's too dark and you're like, oh damn, the footage is too dark, there's nothing I can do about it, pull it into the software, start playing around with it with color correction. You might be able to save it, you might be able to make it look better, but color correction can help with most problems that you get on set can be fixed in post. It's just things like out of focus, your bad sounding sound. Those things aren't very salvageable, but if you've got footage that's a bit too dark or is a bit too bright, or you haven't exposed it correctly, or things like that, you can use color correction in editing software to fix that. Now, I'm mentioning sound effects again, just because you can add the sound effects obviously in the editing process, and it adds a lot more depth to your film. Say you're creating a documentary on, World War I, for example, something like that. You might want to add some World War I, some battle sounds in that, or you might want to, marching and things like that. You can add that all freesound.org. You can find all sorts of sounds like that, and especially if you're working with still images and video, it can help the footage and the images come to life with all these extra added sounds that you can find online. Now there's a little link there that gives, if anyone's a bit new to editing, YouTube did a really good sort of like tutorial, so that you can click on that and that will help you with like the basics of editing. And for some further reading of there's a technique called the J cut, which some people might find quite interesting. Okay, now we're heading into the final stretch now, and something I'm really excited to mention, because I know Roger and Barry and Sue were very excited about this, but the Ken Burns effect when it comes to historical films is integral. Now, they've been doing it since, I think the technique was first properly used in the 70s, and it was made famous by an American documentarian called Ken Burns, who had it named after him because he made some award-winning Vietnam documentaries, where he used still images to almost animate it and bring the war to life. So an example I can show you at the top there is a picture. So you've got a group shot there of some women and children there. But what does is the red square there on that picture. So the camera, you can do it so the camera can zoom in slowly on the three women there, for example, in the front row, and then it can then move to the right slowly. So you get that sense of movement, and you can then see the close-ups of their faces. You can see the movement. It feels like the image is actually a piece of video. And you can add sound effects to that. You can add music to that. You could add children laughing. You could add all those sorts of things, and you can bring these still images to life. And I think in terms of obviously history films, and I know you guys probably have access to a huge database or extensive database of digital images. You can utilize the Ken Burns effect to create quick and easy short films that once you have the know-how, and you know how to do the Ken Burns effect, or know how to utilize it on a smartphone or on a PC editing software, you can make quick and easy films that in my honest opinion would be far more interesting if you would just put it into a book. And for all good use, the book is getting it out there to younger people on social media, on your websites. These sorts of films are integral in the achieving of doing that. And I really think you guys will really like this technique. But yeah, it's called the Ken Burns effect, and it can be done on smartphones and on desktop editing softwares, and it's really easy to learn. Okay, so the final slide now. So say you've got your film and you want to import it on a PowerPoint. That's quick and easy. You've got the PowerPoint workspace in front of you. You go to the top left and it says insert. You click on insert. You then go to the right of the workspace and you have a little video icon. You then click on that video icon and you get some options. So for example, video from file, that'll be any video on your computer. Online film will be any link from YouTube or Vimeo or anything like that, and it would just embed it straight in the PowerPoint for you. So if you wanted to do it as part of an event or part of a presentation or anything like that, you can just embed the finished film on your PowerPoints. And then if you wanted to send those finished films or any footage to colleagues or collaborators or anything like that, obviously when sending large files, you start getting into difficulties. You can't send it over email because there's not enough space and this sorts of things. But WeTransfer is a great website where you can send 2 gigabytes to one person for free each time as well, for 7 days. And they've got 7 days to download it. Up to 2 gigabytes is quite a lot. I can imagine not many of you will be making films bigger than that. But you just have to have your email, their email, pop them a little message. It uploads the film on WeTransfer and it transfers it to them straight away. It's a really quick and easy way to do that. Another quick and easy way is obviously cloud storage. You've probably already heard of this. It sounds very complicated, but it isn't. You go online, you type in OneDrive. I use OneDrive by Microsoft. You set it up with an email and you get 10 gigabytes free. Now, if you sign into that OneDrive account anywhere on your phone, on your computer, computer at work or anything else like that, you can access your files anywhere. There's none of them having to worry about looking after a hard drive or, remembering to send Sue the WeTransfer link or anything like that. You've got the OneDrive, everything available on the OneDrive, and you can then share that footage and, the things you've got stored in there with other colleagues. And you can also do that with Apple's iCloud. Okay, so that's the end, or that, as I said, that's all, folks. If you have any questions, I think Sue's going to host the Q&A now. And I hope you enjoy it. I'll go back on video now, so it makes it a bit more personal.
Yep. Can I just make an observation that I think we in the local history field would spend kind of 90% of our time, 95% of our time thinking about the content, not how to present it. It's certainly not lighting, and you possibly would think about sound. So that was fascinating to see it from the presentation side, really.
Yeah.
Right, I have got a few thoughts, and yes, I should have mentioned at the beginning, and Barry's picked me up on this quite rightly, that Tom's talk will be posted on the Hampshire Film Club YouTube channel, and there's a link to it, or there will be a link to it from Hampshire Archives Trust past events page as well. So all those really useful links that Tom gave us, you can look at in the recording of this. Yeah, so I think that's the Ken Burns effect is certainly one that struck Barry big time.
I think,
Charlotte asks, in your slide about smartphones, you showed a larger tripod which had more than just the smartphone on it. What else could it support, and is it more useful than the basic tripod?
So they're both good. I mean, the larger tripods are for larger cameras. So for smartphones, you don't need a large tripod. But I think what you're talking about is the picture with the it's got a crane like tripod on it, and what that is it's like a tripod, but it can move. It's like it's a mechanical arm. So if you imagine the smartphone on the tripod, you can move the tripod with your hand to the left, and the actual top of the tripod will tilt and turn using a mechanical like wheel. They're a little bit more expensive than tripods, but they essentially do the same thing. But I think in terms of creating the films that you guys would like, a normal tripod's fine. And the basic tripods for the smartphones are just as good as the larger tripods, because you don't really need a large tripod for a small smartphone. Tripods help with shake. You don't want shake when it comes to holding a phone or a camera. I have trouble with that, but the smaller tripods are just as good as the larger tripods.
And I know that with cameras, the tripods on the camera, there's a screw-in function.
Yes, yeah.
But that's not the case, presumably, for things like smartphones. It's like or something, is it?
No, smartphones tend to a bit like the selfie stick, so they sort of clip round the smartphone rather than sort of screw in. Because, like you say, on cameras they have something called a tripod plate, where you clip the tripod on top and then you sort of screw that into the bottom of the camera.
Right.
But no, in terms of smartphones, no, it's usually just it clips round the phone or just under it.
Right. Okay, I've got another one from Helen, who asks, can you recommend any free Android apps?
Right, I knew I was going to get this question. I don't use Android, but I have provided, I haven't shown you, but just after the end slide, there's about 5 or 6 slides with links on. And I did some research on Android apps, and there's a great video by I think he's an Australian guy on YouTube, and he recommends different Android apps for editing and things like that. So I'd recommend going to the links section and just having a look on that video. But
you haven't put that slide up yet, is that right?
Yeah, that's just on the slides after this one. They'll be available.
Okay, brilliant. Heather asks if you've got any tips about long-term preservation of the result of film projects, and wonders whether you were suggesting capturing compressed or uncompressed footage.
Okay, so compressed footage is just, I tips about long-term preservation of the result of film projects. Oh, I don't know, Heather. I might have to have more time to think about that. Okay. The only thing is, if you're capturing an uncompressed footage, you're capturing all the data, so it's going to take up large amounts of space on a hard drive or a computer. If you're capturing compressed footage, obviously you're getting more for your money, but you might not be getting as good a quality of footage when you come to editing it. You might not be able to edit it, as much as you would the uncompressed footage. Obviously, uncompressed is better. They call it raw footage, but that can take up large amounts of space on SD cards and things like that. So it's just important to take that into consideration when thinking about that.
I guess it's like photos, isn't it?
Exactly.
If you're going digital images, you keep them as TIFFs.
Yeah, exactly.
You use them as JPEGs for convenience for sharing.
Yeah.
Glenn has got an idea for a mini series for you. I'm not sure. I might let that one come to you direct for you to pick up on. Andrew Howard asks if he can make a couple of comments as a former professional interviewee, but he hasn't actually given me the question. So Andrew, if you'd like to put your pop your comments through the chat button, I'll relay them to Tom.
Right.
There you are. Yes, do you want to put your comments direct?
Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I thought Tom was brilliant. He's taught me an awful lot about trying to make a video, which I never knew, even though I've been at the other end of the camera for an awful lot of my life. But I was a little bit interested at the beginning when you were talking about pampering and all of that things. Of course, you can go to 2 ends of the scale in interviewing. needs. You can get the amateur one who wants to be pampered and the professional one who wants to be there for 2.5 minutes at most.
Yeah.
And if you've got that sort of difference, it's something that's incredibly important to think about.
Yeah.
If you've got a PR officer or someone like that, he can know a much better place to do the photographs than you do. If you want the building as a background, people tend to forget that. And I know I look like the world's ugliest PR bimbo, but one other thing which might not immediately appear obvious to you is that I'm 6'4". And the number of people who worked out how to do an interview with me, either using a 5'2" interviewer or shooting downwards past me onto the motorway, was incredible. I ended up always stressing that I was 6'4", but it did cause almighty problems to people who worked out just what they wanted to do, and then I turned up.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I remember seeing even the BBC gets that wrong. Dan Walker, who's on the BBC breakfast program, he's incredibly tall, and I've seen many interviews with him seeming to deal with people who are half his size. He looks quite peculiar on screen.
I mean, I actually sort of almost once fused my hand to a freezing cold motorway bridge parapet because I was having to crouch down to be as low as the shot of the motorway behind me.
It's important, obviously, to take that into consideration, and also different skin colors as well. When it comes to lighting, that's different. You know, you've got to take that into consideration as well. You like certain skin colors you like different to people who might be of lighter complexion. So it's important as well to take, you know, height, skin color and things like that into consideration when doing interviews, because obviously you don't want to get those things wrong, or in your case, have you crouching down for long periods of time.
Yeah, and it's like, do your research, doesn't it, all the time?
Always.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I ask you to take yourself off the meeting thing? David Reinl asks, in television programs, he says sometimes you see an historic still image, which then becomes apparently 3D with people or buildings further away looking more distant. Is that the Ken Burns effect?
Yeah.
Or is that something different?
So that is the Ken Burns effect, but it's a more complex form of it. So they use something called Adobe After Effects, which is a special effects software. And that sort of software is used to create those 3D images where people, it's like still images, but you get that 3D and movement effect. So it is the Ken Burns effect. It is a more advanced option of it. And if you go on YouTube and type in Ken Burns effect, I can't remember, it's called, so if you type in Ken Burns effect special effects, you'll get those examples that David's just mentioned where they got that 3D look to them. But they're slightly more complicated than the the zooming and panning that I talked about earlier.
Right, that's very interesting, very useful. Another one from Sue Larkin. She asks, once you've filmed, how do you suggest you manage the ownership of the material?
So it depends. So I mean, it depends who you're filming for. If you're the person filming it on the day, then it's your footage, in my opinion, because you're going out of the way to film and organise all of that. But obviously, if you're making it for a client, so for example, we did the remote interview series for Hampshire Archive Trust. That's my footage, but I wouldn't say, oh, that's my footage. We use that in collaboration. So I think it's important to collaborate as much as possible in these sorts of things before you start, talking about things of ownership of material. But it's important to know that the material that you create is yours. And if you wanted to share that with somebody, it's important to talk to the relevant people. But there obviously are complications of that. But in my opinion, if you've recorded the footage, you own it. But it's not to be too sort of strict with that. But you don't want people sharing it, your footage or using it without your knowledge. That's obviously where complications come in. But it's important to know that collaboration, I think, is the key to that. You start getting into a bit deep waters if you start throwing around things like, oh, this is my footage, that isn't yours, you can't use that. But it's important also to remember that you do own it and that you do have a right as to where that is shared and what is done with it.
I guess it's a question of like a contract, isn't it? Without being that formal necessarily, that you both parties. I mean, the work I mean, we had no problem with you. You did the work for the trust for free, effectively. But there should have been something that says this was done by Tom Young, so that should be credited on anything, and your colleague Jack actually as well. But where you'd get twitchy, I imagine, is if we started selling that in some way.
Exactly.
So it's looking after your commercial rights, isn't
sure.
it?
It's being aware that you have to ask before but you have to ask these things. You have to be aware that, exactly like you say, you can't just go around sharing it and using whatever music you like and using whatever. You've got to be aware that somebody might have put in a lot of effort and made that, so you've got to be aware with the sharing and the rights that come along with it.
I mean, again, it comes back to photography in a way, because if for instance someone like yourself were commissioned to film a local history festival, something like that, but you've been commissioned and paid, then for the commissioner to say to you, well, that work now becomes ours, it's a discussion you need to have to be sure.
Exactly. So again, if you made a footage for a client and they've paid you, that's not just your footage. There's more complicated than that. But if, for example, you filmed the footage and your client hadn't paid you, that's your footage until they pick up the money, basically.
Or you make you make a gift of it, whatever the arrangement between you. So it's another one of these pre-filming things to sort out, isn't it? Really?
And I probably should have mentioned it. It's important to get all those things, a contract might seem too serious, but sometimes actually they're probably the easiest way to do it. Just get it down on a bit of paper, as black and white as you can.
Well, I always say it's managing expectations, isn't it? And if you both know where your expectations are, then you're unlikely to end up in a fight about it.
Exactly.
Just both need to know what's involved. Andrew has raised an interesting question. He says, relevant for us actually and today, but if you post a video you recorded on Facebook, or I guess other platforms, do you automatically then give up your ownership rights because you put it in the public domain?
So no, you still own it, but you are using Facebook's platform to show that video. So that, again, it's your video, but you've almost silently signed up to Facebook's terms and conditions when it comes to whatever you've done with that on their platform, because you are sharing it on their platform after all. So it's your video still, but you might have to abide by certain rules and regulations when it comes to that, because you are using their site. That's their video essentially. Their site is their film that they've made is the social media thing, but you're using their social media to showcase your film. So it's just important to know that you're using their platform to showcase.
I wonder how many of us read the terms and conditions.
Exactly. Not many.
I don't think I've got any more questions coming in at the moment. So, I think that's it. No, I think that's it for today. Oh, if you want to put your last slide up that you mentioned, Tom, that might be useful. So it's on the recording then as well.
So I've just got it might look a little bit complicated. It's just basically links and further reading. So I've just got some slides so if I've talked about anything briefly on the slide, these sort of go into more detail. Some of the links are the same on the slide, but I've sort of tried to include them all together just because what is B-roll, for example, my little bit about white balance, things I didn't that aren't really integral.